Hey everybody, this is Mr. Moppin coming at you again with another APGov video. Today we're taking a look at topic 4.4, focusing in on the influence of political events on ideology. So we've been spending a lot of time recently talking about political socialization and the things that play a role on defining one's overall political ideology. Things like family and geography and religion and ethnicity and all those things. But something else that also plays a role are major political events that take place at a fairly young age or relatively young age as adults in one's life. So in other words, each generation is a little bit different. Each generation's views are going to be a little bit different relative to one another because of different unique events that each generation is going to be facing. So what we're going to do here is going to take a look at a few different generations in, relatively modern American history and see how those particular events have played a role in shaping these, views on their respective generations. And so, first thing I want to do is I want to look at, what we kind of described here in the notes as the quote-unquote older generation. These are folks that were young adults during the 1930s and 1940s. Now, granted, the vast majority of this generation has unfortunately passed on, but there are still some of those folks around today, and their political views are still shaped in part based on their experiences. One of the major experiences that this generation is going to face as, either adults or as children will be the Great Depression. That period in the 1930s where we're going to be seeing record high unemployment, 25% overall unemployment. If you were black, it was 50% unemployment. Never before and never since have we had such a level of desperation and hopelessness with regards to our economy. And as a result of that, we see the election of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the implementation of what's going to be known as the New Deal. And what the New Deal does is generate a flurry of new programs that are going to provide assistance and help and really most importantly hope for Americans during this very, very challenging time. And note, what this does is greatly expand the power of the federal government, also expands the power of the presidency, and it has an effect on many of that generation out of a sense of, government can help. Government can function to provide help when people need it. So, for those, especially those more on the left, the Great Depression era is going to be a time where government will prove to step up in a time of great need. Something else that is going to be obviously very impactful is going to be World War II. What this does is unify us to some degree ideologically about the evils of fascism, that authoritarianism in the form of fascism via Hitler's Nazi Germany, Mussolini's Italy, and so on, that, these were dangerous types of governments that had to be stopped. And, a willingness across the board, left and right, to, try to fight this common foe. Additionally, we're going to be seeing World War II playing a role in expanding what we perceive as, possibilities for women in the workplace, aka the Rosie the Riveter phenomenon. And with the end of World War II, we almost seamlessly enter into the Cold War. And this leads to, a concern about stopping the spread of communism. Now, granted, Democrats and Republicans alike were united on trying to stop the spread of communism, though conservatives made it much more of a priority than liberals did. And, the Cold War, the idea that, there was this attempt by the Soviet Union to spread communism around the globe, and you saw China fall to communism. You saw Eastern Europe fall to communism. You saw Southeast Asia eventually fall to communism. There was a real sense, especially for those on the right, that you have to use government resources. You have to take action, even if it's military action, to stop the spread of communism. And this is going to help to explain, for example, why, many on the right are going to be very much in favor of engaging in the Vietnam War to stop that expansion of communism. Now, if you move forward to the next generation, your baby boomers, people that were, growing up in the the 1950s and 60s, becoming young adults in the 60s and 70s, they're obviously going to be impacted by things such as the civil rights movement. The idea that, we truly have not attained our promised values in the Declaration of Independence until we actually are willing to have legislation in place to guarantee, protection from discrimination in the workplace and public services, and guarantee truly that equal right to vote. So the baby boomer generation is going to be galvanized by this civil rights movement, and it's going to very much affect the left ideologically. This is going to help to spur the feminist movement, the emerging gay rights movement, the American Indian movement, and many, many others. So it's going to have a very galvanizing effect for those young people on the left, very much affected by this. And the other, major event that's going to be, affecting young adults during the baby boomer generation will be the Vietnam War, and how the Vietnam War is certainly going to be something that's going to be dividing Americans. Baby boomers, more of the mindset that the war was wrong and unnecessary and was a waste of American lives and Vietnamese lives, where their parents were much more likely to believe that the war was necessary to stop the evil spread of communism. For many of the baby boomer generation, particularly those on the left, there was a sense that America's, military response is not necessarily what is needed to achieve our goals. This is also a generation that's going to be affected by the Watergate scandal. There's going to be a notion that, government isn't necessarily going to be trustworthy. When you factor in the scandals of Watergate and the lies from the Johnson administration in Vietnam, we start to see young adults of the baby boomer generation begin to kind of have a sense that, unlike their parents, which tended to trust governments, there's a much greater sense that, maybe you can't trust government. And, what we have seen, of course, as we take a look at, factors that affect ideology, we've mentioned before that, age has a conservatizing impact on people, at least relatively speaking. And so what we have noticed is that, and so we were saying that, as we get older, we tend to get more relatively conservative, and we've kind of seen that happen with the baby boomers to some degree. For example, there are more of the baby boomers that have kind of moved over to the GOP in the last 20 years. We've certainly seen, for example, a large chunk of the base for the support for Donald Trump in the 2016 and 2020 elections come from the baby boomer generation. And, it's a lot of it is just a sense from some of the baby boomers by the time, now that they're in their, senior years, the Democratic Party has gotten too liberal on a number of issues, particularly social issues, like gay marriage. And to kind of round this out, we'll take a look at, kind of what we describe here as the younger generation. And I would kind of describe this as Gen Xers / older millennials. I would kind of describe this as, basically folks that, born, since 1960, between, 1965 and 1995 maybe, or 1990. And, this generation, which is my generation, we were heavily impacted, for example, by the events of 9/11. On that tragic occasion, there was this sense of, security that was seemingly, untouchable, that we had kind of built ourselves into in the 1990s with the end of the Cold War and a very prosperous economy. There was just kind of a sense that America was, in this, situation where we really couldn't be harmed, we couldn't be hurt, and this was, a very, very rude awakening to the reality that that was not the case. And so, there's this kind of a sense of unease that previous generations didn't quite have in terms of our domestic security. And, this has, kind of led some of my generation to believe that, we need to, have more government power to kind of have the ability to, kind of root out and stop potential terrorists. Others, have had, more of an idea of maybe we need to be more isolationist in terms of our foreign policy. The idea being is that, maybe we just stay out of the Middle East, then, Middle Eastern terrorists, won't have a beef with us. And then something else that's going to have, a major impact, and this is especially as you get into the millennials, the Great Recession. The Great Recession is going to, show once again that there is this distrust of the financial industry to some extent, which is, in some respects a parallel to that, older generation from the Great Depression, a sense that, the financial institutions really can't be trusted. They're kind of rigged against you. And, for those particularly on the left, a sense that, government has a responsibility to help people when there is a tremendous economic crisis. And, I think this has driven, some of the support for liberalism and the Democratic Party amongst, millennials in particular. Now, once again, remember, age does play a factor. The younger you are, the more liberal you tend to be. And note, there's still events to come. You could, certainly think about, the effects of the 2020 election and the storming of the Capitol. What kind of an impact is that going to have on millennials and Gen Zers and folks like that? So, every generation is going to have their views regarding government and policy and stuff like that affected by the events that they experience, especially at a younger age. Absolutely. So we're just hitting some of the very broad points. Obviously you can go in much more detail on a number of different things, but that's just kind of a broad overview of it. So anyhow, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.